Hello everyone. How's it going? This is Azren, the language nerd here, owner of the Calgary Language Nerds, and welcome to today's YouTube video and, of course, podcast episode. Today, I'd like to continue my series, which is called Azren's Top Language Learning Tips. If you haven't seen the other episodes in this series, please visit the link in the description box of this episode, and you can see every single episode that I've made. Now, today, I'd like to give some advice on how to learn pronunciation in another language. A lot of people find pronunciation difficult. In fact, many people I interact with think that mastering pronunciation is probably one of the hardest parts of learning another language. And so today, my hope is that I'm able to give at least a few different pieces of advice that can help you learn the sounds of whatever language you are trying to learn. I'm going to give a number of different pieces of advice today. Some of them will work really well for you, and some of them might work less well. And so I encourage you to try the different tips that I give you today and see what works the best for you. Now, the first thing, this is really, I would say, primarily for beginners, I would say, is you want to be taught the alphabet and be taught the sounds of the language. For example, when I was learning Spanish, well, one of the first things that I learned was the alphabet and how to pronounce each letter. I listened to it, I said it out loud myself, I tried to imitate it to the best of my ability, and that was my introduction. Here's a story I've never told before. Back in 2019, I spent about a week, maybe a little bit less, in the south of India, in a Tamil-speaking region. I don't know how to pronounce that language correctly, so I probably didn't pronounce it the correct way. But anyway, and I don't speak that language whatsoever. And I was there for a short period of time. So I wanted to go out and at least have some basics, at least know some basics, so that I can go and buy food or things of that nature. I remember going to a shoe shop and I needed to buy shoes for some reason. I don't know why, but I went to a shoe shop and I tried to speak with them in Tamil. Now, when I was learning the Tamil basics, the very first thing I pulled up was a YouTube video just going through the alphabet so I can start to familiarize myself on what this language even sounds like. So when you're a beginner, that's a great place to start. You want to have an idea in your brain of, roughly speaking, what the language sounds like. Once you've been introduced to the alphabet and the sounds of the language, then you want to actually try saying them yourself. You want to try saying these sounds and you want to try and imitate them as closely as possible to what you're hearing. At this phase, it is helpful to get a native speaker who can tell you if you're pronouncing it correctly or not. Now, you do have two different types of language learners. One type of language learner wants to master pronunciation, and one type of language learner wants to just speak clearly. It might not be perfect, they have a little bit of an accent, but at least it's clear and everyone knows exactly what you're saying. I would say that most language learners probably fall into that camp, where they don't care if it's perfect, but they want to at least speak clearly. And if you're someone who's trying to speak clearly, the main thing you're looking for is for the native speaker to say to you, yeah, that's actually pretty good. That's pretty close. That's good. Yeah, I understand that. The main thing is when you're speaking is the native speaker understanding what you're saying. That's what you're looking for. If you're trying to master the pronunciation, well, we're going to talk about that in a few moments in this podcast here. So that's where you start. Get an introduction to the alphabet and the sounds of the language. This could be through a YouTube video or through a class. It doesn't really matter where you get it. And then you want to try practicing saying those sounds yourself and trying to imitate it as closely as possible. After that, some other things that you'll probably want to do is, first of all, practice speaking regularly. You practicing your speaking and getting better at forming sentences, communicating with native speakers, that will at least marginally help your pronunciation become more clear, at least marginally. The reason I say at least marginally is because when you're learning another language and you don't have a very high level in that language, often you might have an accent because you're not only thinking about pronouncing things clearly, but you're also thinking about, how do I say the thing that I want to say? So you stumble over your words and you stutter. The words don't come out quite right. And so the pronunciation gets more muffled not necessarily because you can't pronounce the sounds, but because your brain is thinking about not just the pronunciation. I'll give you an example here. This weekend in Taiwan, I went to the south, a city in the south of Taiwan called Kaohsiung. In Kaohsiung, I have a friend who lives there, and we hung out for a long time. We did about 11 hours of hanging out over 2 days, so that's quite a bit. And I found with him, sometimes my pronunciation was getting muffled, and it wasn't quite as clear as it typically would be because we were venturing into very complicated topics. At one point in time, my friend was asking me, and I was asking him too, about the tax system in Canada and in Taiwan. He was telling me how their sales tax is a certain amount, their income tax system works like this, and then he was asking Canada how that works. And I haven't talked about that topic all that frequently. And so I was struggling to pronounce things as clearly as I normally would because I was venturing into new territory. I was trying to think of the words I need to say, and I was trying to think of how to pronounce things clearly. Whereas if you ask me something like, oh, how long have you learned Mandarin, or where are you from, or things I've said 1,000 times, I pronounce them very clearly because it's so automatic. Responding to those statements is so automatic to me that it's actually quite easy for me to pronounce them really well. Does that make sense? And so just doing some speaking practice as it is, and just not even a speaking practice, but overall learning, studying, or using the language in a way where your level is improving. As your level improves, your pronunciation will marginally improve as well. Now, I say marginally because this now leads to the next point. I say marginally because just trying to improve your overall level in the language you're learning is not enough to improve your pronunciation to the level that you might want to improve it, because it will only improve marginally. Why is that? That's because, let's say you're interacting, at least on a semi-regular basis, with native speakers alongside other self-study strategies you're using, right? Whether it's textbooks or classes or whatever it is, okay? But every now and then you're semi-regularly interacting with native speakers and you're communicating with them. Well, what's going to happen is unless you work on your pronunciation actively, what's probably going to happen is your pronunciation will improve to the extent necessary for the other person to understand you and know more. Meaning, I'll give an example. Let's say you're learning English and you're a French speaker, a native French speaker, and you say something like, "Bonjour, my name is Azren." Bonjour, sorry, that's the wrong. Hello. Hello, my name is Azren. Hello, my name is Azren. Well, you all understood. Hello, my name is Azren. But because you all understood, and if I was talking to you in real life, you would react as if you understood because you did. It doesn't give me any cues that I need to work on my pronunciation in that sentence. However, if I was pronouncing it in a way where you weren't understanding, that would be a cue that I would need to fix how I'm saying it. So unless you actively work on your pronunciation, by default, what will happen is you will work on your pronunciation only to the extent where you're understood by the other person, but not any further than that, or at least not much further than that. So by working on your speaking and interacting with native speakers and things of that nature, you will marginally improve your pronunciation, but you won't get anywhere near perfecting it or even being very good at it. So you do need to do a few different strategies to take it a step further. One thing to do is to listen actively to how native speakers speak, meaning when someone's talking, try to really focus intently all the time when you're listening to the language that you're trying to learn. Listen intently. Really try to listen to the sounds. Don't just listen for meaning. I'll say that again. Don't just listen for meaning. Listen intently to the sounds of the language. That comes more naturally to some than to others. But try. That's one piece of it. Something else that'll also be helpful as well is, for some of you anyway, not everybody, but something worth trying, is to record yourself speak and then listen back to the recording. That will also be very helpful for some of you. Something that I personally find is very helpful is to have a good, strong foundation in phonetics. Phonetics is a branch of linguistics that focuses specifically on pronunciation. And so if you have a good foundation in phonetics, that will help you with that should help you with your pronunciation. I would recommend probably having a foundation in the phonetics of the language you're learning. For example, if you're learning French phonetics, Spanish phonetics. If it's Japanese phonetics. But even just a general phonetics background will help you. You can do that by signing up for classes, a phonetics class online on a platform. I'm assuming they have it. I'll give you a few options. I actually haven't looked, but I'm assuming a platform such as Udemy, UDEMY, or Coursera. Coursera, it's course, COURSERA, Coursera. Those are two platforms to look on that would very likely have a good introductory phonetics class. Even just YouTube, you can probably find lots of great introductory videos. You definitely can. Some great introductory phonetics videos on YouTube. So having a good foundation in phonetics will help. I would say if you were to do, even 20 hours of work on phonetics to get a good foundation, that's going to go a long way. I'll give a few basic phonetics concepts right now that should be helpful if you don't have a phonetics background. First of all, every single sound that you can make in another language all starts in the mouth. Now, that sounds really silly. It all has to do with your mouth, essentially, when it's a spoken language. Now, you might think, well, Azren, why are you saying that? That's common sense. It is common sense. But realize that if you're unable to pronounce something in a language, a good place to start is the mouth, to ask a native speaker or to research online what's happening in the mouth to pronounce the sound or the word that you're unable to pronounce. I'll give you an example. Let's say you are unable to pronounce the French sound un, as in like linge. Linge is laundry. There's some laundry. The kind of the clothesline where I dry my clothes is just outside the window, which is where that word came from. So like linge, that has an sound. Maybe you think to yourself, I can't pronounce that sound. I don't know how. Well, a great place to start is to research what's happening in the mouth. What do you have to do in your mouth to pronounce that sound? I'll give you another analogy. I played soccer for many, many years. And when we learned to pass a soccer ball, we learned exactly what to do with our foot. We learned that we turn our foot sideways, we hit with not the insole, the inside part of the foot, whatever that's called. We learned how to swing the leg. We learned step by step how to position our foot and hit the ball in a way where it goes where you want the ball to go. And then we would practice it over and over and over and over. We would drill it until we had muscle memory of how to pass the ball. I probably passed a ball 50,000 times, something, I don't know how many times, but I couldn't even tell you how many times I passed a ball in a soccer ball. Same thing with shooting. We learn, okay, well, you hit with your laces, right? Your other non-kicking foot needs to be placed here. If you want the ball to go up, you need to put your foot here, and this is where your kicking foot goes. If you want it to stay low, you put your foot here, you position your body like this, your laces have to be on this angle, you follow through in this way, you point, blah, blah, blah. You get every single step, and then you drill it over and over until you're able to shoot the ball the way you want. And we would have whole shooting clinics. Even, I played soccer for like 13 years. And even, let's say, 10 years after learning soccer, we would do like a shooting clinic. We'd spend like an hour and a half only doing shooting. Everyone knows how to shoot a ball, but you're trying to fine tune it so you can shoot it exactly as you want to and hit the exact targets that you exactly want to hit from any position in a shooting range, right? So I'm saying all this because with pronunciation, it's very similar. The first thing often for people is to learn the theory. Where does your tongue go? Where is the air flowing through? What are you doing with your vocal cords? Are they vibrating or are they not vibrating? What's the airflow like going through the mouth? It gets highly technical. And then you can do a bunch of drills. You practice saying the word or the sound over and over to train, and you try to fire all those muscles in the right way to produce the right sound. For those of you that have played a sport before, and you remember the process of learning a skill in that sport, whether it's shooting and soccer like me, or even serving. I played tennis for a number of years. That was more of a hobby, but I was very interested. God, the number of forehand drills, backhand drills, serving drills, volleys, and the number of drills you do. And the first 150 times you suck at it. And even after 150 times, you're still working on it. You're still not hitting it exactly as you wish. Golf, if you play golf, I've done golf as well. Same thing. God, you go to the driving range and practice so many times to get that swing just right. My uncle's been playing golf for like 20 years or something like that. And he still has a problem with his slice. He still has a tendency to slice the ball too much. That's after roughly 20 years, something like that. So like with pronunciation, it's the same thing. You will have to practice it quite diligently, and your mouth might still misfire after a number of years, and you still don't quite say it exactly as you would have liked to. And I'll give you another analogy, a different one, but similar. If you don't actively how do I say this? If you don't actively use the language regularly and focus on the pronunciation, it is very easy to lose it. Kind of like if you don't go to the gym, if you had a very strong body and then you stop going to the gym, you'll lose some of those muscles. Kind of similar in your mouth, kind of. Not exactly the same, because you could go from being super fit to being overweight relatively quickly, from my understanding. You're not going to completely lose the ability to roll your R like in Spanish or whatever language. You're not going to completely lose that ability. You're not, by not practicing it. But you will lose a little, you will lose some of your pronunciation ability. So, good examples in Spanish now for me. It's funny. I've had a number of comments recently from native speakers. A few now. There have been at least like 2 or 3 in recent history where I'm talking to someone, maybe more than that actually, where I'm talking to someone in Spanish. And the comment I'm getting now is, oh yeah, we can tell that you have a Latin American influence, but we also can sort of tell that maybe you might be a foreigner. Maybe, right? There's a little bit of a comment like that, like, oh yeah, you have a Latin American influence. We can't quite tell well, but maybe you're a foreigner. Yeah, maybe it's your face. Whereas in the past, I used to get, oh, you sound like way back. This is years and years ago. People would say, oh, you sound Peruvian. Oh, are you Peruvian? Oh, wow. It sounds like, wow, there's a really strong Peruvian influence. Or, oh, wow, are you from such and such country? Are you from, or wow, you sound just like a native speaker. But lately, especially now here in Taipei, where I am, like I've spoken a few times people in Spanish, and I speak so much Mandarin that when I just speak Spanish, my brain's like, I can't find the words right away. Like it really is hard for me to pull Spanish out. So here in Taipei, when I'm talking to people in Spanish, I've met a few native speakers. They've all two of them have said to me, "Oh yeah, we notice a Latin American influence, but yeah, maybe you're a foreigner." And it's like, yeah, I could feel it when I'm talking because I'm doing so much Mandarin. So that pronunciation edge I used to have is semi-lost because I'm not really working on it. I'm not really using Spanish nowadays. But if I were in Mexico or whatever it is, that edge, I would get that edge right back because I'd be so focused on the pronunciation. So all I'm trying to say is pronunciation, if you do care about it quite a bit and you want to master it and you want to maintain that mastery, it's a constant focus, the same way you constantly go to the gym to maintain your fitness and your strength and your flexibility, so on and so forth. Other strategies you can do for the other strategy, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Other strategies you can do for learning pronunciation is called shadowing. This is a hit and miss strategy. It works for some, doesn't work for others. Shadowing is where you can watch other videos where they go through in more depth how to do it, but essentially you listen to someone talk in a recorded fashion, video or audio, and you try to imitate them exactly as they sound. You try to imitate them exactly, precisely what they said, the way they said it, the intonation, the volume, the expressiveness. You copy them precisely. Something that's worth trying too. The last tip I will give you here for pronunciation, aside from that mimicry and such, is to, when you have a problem sound, a sound or a letter or a word you're unable to pronounce, one strategy to get yourself to be able to pronounce it is to first see if you can say something similar to that word or to that sound. Now, this gets a bit tricky, and I hope it makes sense. I'll try to explain it as clearly as I can. Let's say you're unable to pronounce the French R. The French R either sounds like or okay. Now, other languages have that R too, so it's not only French that has it, but that's one language I speak that has that sound, so I call it a French R. So that R sound, or, okay? Well, if you put on your phonetics glasses, right, which is why I say having a basics in phonetics is very helpful. When you put on your phonetics glasses, or your phonetics hat, you'll understand that you're using, without even using technical language, right? And I could technically explain what exactly phonetically what's happening in the mouth. But even if you don't know that, you can at least figure out that is in the back of your throat. That's easy enough to figure out. So you might go, okay, well, I can't go, I don't even, my mouth doesn't even know where to start. What you might do is, okay, you might ask yourself, is there another sound that I make that's kind of in the back of my mouth that's similar? Or even not similar, even close to it just by distance. You might go, okay, let me think. And I've done this before for French. And so there's a sound like k, 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 is in the back of your mouth, just like is in the back of your mouth. Okay? So you start by saying a sound that's roughly at least somewhat similar to the sound that you're struggling with. And then you work your way back, in this case back, because you're going to the back of your throat, you work your way back to the letter or the sound or the word that you're struggling to say. You can do this for other letters too. It doesn't have to be an R, but you find a sound that's similar to it, and you start by that, and you work your way towards saying the sound or the word that's hard for you. I've done this a lot when I teach pronunciation. It's really easy to do on a teaching perspective, but from a learning perspective, you can at least think about that. I will see, oh, so-and-so, such and such person can't say the letter, I don't know, like, let's find a really simple one. Like if you couldn't say the is a sound in Gujarati and Spanish, right? The, it's a T that's pronounced between your teeth. Da, 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 like that. A lot of English speakers can't say it. Like if you were trying to say the first thing I might do is saying, okay, well, hang on a second. Can you say like the as in the word think? And they go, yeah, I can say the, like think. Well, now we're 80% of the way there. You're 80% there. Because the, if you look at my mouth, if you're watching the video and not the podcast, the, that th, you put your tongue almost in the same, you're almost doing the same thing as when you say ta 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 ta. Like those two sounds are really close to each other. They're not that different. So if I can have you say the, you're way closer to being able to say the than you were before. Because most English speakers, when they say the, they say ta, like the English T, ta 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 ta. The problem is ta is not that close. Like the position of your tongue and what you're doing with your mouth is not that close to a th. It's not really that similar, or to a th, excuse me. But th and th are much closer together. So that might be something you want to think about is, can you say a sound that's similar to it or close to it in your mouth in terms of place of articulation? And that might get you there. That might help you get that sound that's hard. And last thing I'll say, one last thing, I just thought of it right now, actually, that's really helpful for pronunciation. I can nerd out on pronunciation all day. I love pronunciation. Last thing on pronunciation I'll say, and I'll wrap this up, that can be helpful, is sometimes you might not be able to say the letter in a certain position in a word, but you can say it in a different position. So let me give you an example. Let's go back to that French. Let's go back to the French R, that sound, right? R's can show up in the beginning, middle, or end of a word. You might think that you can't pronounce an R in French, but that might only be partially true. In fact, it's highly likely to be partially true because you probably could pronounce an R in at least more easily in one part of the word than you could in another. maybe for you, if R is the first letter, that's really easy. But if R is kind of in the middle, that's hard. Or if R is at the end, that's easy. But in the beginning, it's hard. Another variation of that is what letter is surrounding the letter you can't pronounce. For instance, you can't pronounce an R. Well, in French, for instance, there are TRs, like the word très and trois and trou. There are GRs, like the word grand or gros. There are FRs, like froid. There are VRs, like vrai. There are Rs that are surrounded by two vowels with like a vowel R, like pur, right? P-U-R, there's a U before the vowel. You have words like where it's a vowel R and another vowel, such as Marie, the name Marie, right? R's can be surrounded by all sorts of different letters, T's and F's and also vowels. And well, if you're struggling with a sound or a letter, understand that you might have an easier or harder time with that letter in different places of a word and when it's surrounded by other letters. So you might want to play around with the letters that are surrounding the sound you're struggling with and or with where the letter is in a word. And so you want to start with the easier ones and then work your way to being able to say the harder ones. Generally, as a rule of thumb, actually, let's stay away from that. That gets really technical into phonetics, so let's stay away from that. So, okay. Well, that was a longer video / podcast than usual, but as I said, I love pronunciation. There's a lot that I really love doing deep dives into pronunciation. It's my favorite thing to teach. And so if you have any questions on this, you're welcome to contact me by visiting my website, azrenthelanguagenerd.com/contact. That's AZ or ZREN, thelanguagenerd.com/contact. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Yeah, any questions that you have. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll chat later. Bye-bye.